to them sisters, allies, and loved ones. Welcome to As Told by Childless Women, an oral history series that aims to usher our stories into permanent archives of global history where they have always belonged. I'm your host, Joby Tyson, and the founder of Tudum Global, a media platform for childless women. And when I first envisioned this series, I knew I wanted to take an active role in documenting the narratives of involuntary childless women and the childless experience. As a researcher, I know too well that archives have the power to preserve community memory and influence individual identity. Today's episode gives a voice to unexplained infertility, which means that not only is one not able to conceive, but there isn't even a diagnosis to why. And behind every childless woman, there's a story. Today's guest, I'm going to bring in Laurie Spellmeyer. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, Joby. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. I remember months ago, you were a part of our print column on tudumglobal.com, the conversations with the childless woman next door. And you shared that you were childless for several reasons. Firstly, before we get into your fertility journey, I just want you to tell us who you are.
Thank you. I'm Laurie Spellmeyer. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a social worker and a childless woman, like you said, for a few different reasons.
Okay. Well, as always, I like to start these conversations from the beginning. So can you just walk us through your journey from the beginning?
Right. I did not meet my husband. We didn't get married until I was 35, almost 36. And while we had always wanted children and had discussed that, we did discuss in the beginning about how we were both a little older. Again, I was almost 36 when we got married, and he was 44. We got married, and within 2 months of our marriage, he was diagnosed with cancer. And the first year of our marriage was spent, with his surgery and healing and radiation treatment from cancer. So we really didn't start trying to have a family for probably another year and a half, by which time I was, almost 38 then. I went to various doctors, and it wasn't until I was 42 years old. I went to lots of specialists and was finally treated by a specialist in Nebraska who diagnosed me with severe endometriosis. And so there were many years of not knowing and why we weren't getting pregnant and all the complex emotions around that.
So just so everyone knows, endometriosis is a disorder in which tissue that normally lines the uterus grows outside of the uterus. So you mentioned about the severe endometriosis. Can you expound on that? What was your experience with that?
Well, I think as I've come to know, it's a lot of experience that many other women that I've talked to have had, very painful periods that many doctors and a lot of male doctors just said that was part of being a woman and was not treated. And there was no solution, there was no option other than prescription medications, painkillers, for the severe cramping, things like that I really didn't want to do. I wanted to try to find a solution or approach it in a natural way. But the specialist who was very good and diagnosed me with the severe endometriosis also stated that I had low thyroid and low hormones, which were also contributing factors to why I couldn't get pregnant. And so he was a great doctor with great staff, and I had surgery with him, and that helped me physically, but it still did not, of course, solve the issue of not being able to conceive and have children.
So the surgery you received was removing what, fibroids?
It removed the endometriosis and repaired the lining. And I also had, they removed my appendix at the time because that was also inflamed from the endometriosis. But prior to that, like I said, from the time I was about probably in my early 30s until 42, no doctor had ever diagnosed me with that.
So yeah, unexplained infertility until that point.
Yes.
So often, as childless women, we receive unsolicited advice, and one of those unsolicited advice is, "Why don't you just adopt?" But you tried to adopt. Can you explain your process about that?
We did, because I'm a social worker. My husband is a teacher. We were both, very open to adoption, and had started to save money. We knew that that would be a very costly expense. As a social worker, I did some research and found agencies that I thought would be good to work with. And we, as everybody knows, put out quite a bit of money, and nothing happened. And I think part of the reason that we were told was that many women who are creating adoption plans for their children are young teenage women. And so when they looked at the profiles of the pictures and the life stories of me and my husband and why we wanted to adopt, we looked old to them.
Oh, wow.
Even though we were, I was in my late 30s, he was in his early 40s, which is understandable to somebody who's, a young teenage girl. So the agency that we worked with, we had been on a waiting list for 2 years, and we would receive emails that said things like, "Do you want your information shown to young parents? Create an adoption plan where, just these very extenuating circumstances where maybe the father of the child was in prison, the mother had severe mental illness, maybe one of them was homeless, there was drug use involved, maybe there were going to be some medical issues." And we would have to decide in a matter of hours, did we want to be considered to adopt this child? And it was just heartbreaking. It was very, very difficult for us. And sometimes we said yes, and sometimes we said no. So then after 2 years of that, when there had not been any placement, any young parents interested in meeting us, it was time to put out some more money, and my husband and I had thought and prayed and talked to some people who supported us, and we decided at that time that we were ready to end the adoption path.
So when you speak of costly, are you saying 4 figures, 5 figures?
I think we put out probably over $10,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you also have
And
been.
that was, I'm sorry, Joby, and that was 10 years ago. So,
Oh, wow.
so now it would be more.
Mm-hmm. So after the adoption process didn't work for you and your husband, then you all went the foster care route?
Yes.
Talk about that experience.
Yeah, that was a great experience for us. Again, I'm a social worker. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I became an aunt when I was in 2nd grade. And I have 9 nieces and nephews. And so we just really wanted children and felt like that was something that we were really committed to. And so we decided to foster parent, and we worked with an agency that was great. The social worker knew that we could not have children and that we wanted to be of service while we were trying to adopt. So we went with an agency, and over the course of about 6 years, we fostered 22 babies. The oldest I think was about 3 or 4. And it was an agency where the parents would voluntarily seek foster care. So the children were not, in custody of the state. Maybe the mother had some medical issues and had to be in the hospital, and there was no family to care for the child. Maybe the family had lost their housing and they needed placement for a child. So the longest we had a child was 3 months. And we would also have babies that were coming from the hospital and would stay with us until they were adopted. And so it was a great experience for us. It was not easy. I do not recommend it for every childless couple. But it was a great experience for us in that we were of service, and those babies, I think, just helped heal our hearts while we were on our own childless journey. And we have a couple of the babies who were adopted that we still keep in touch with.
What was the mental strain on that?
I think a lot of times for me, And I think my husband would say the experience was different for him, but for me, it was a lot of isolation, not fitting in social events, wondering why it was so easy for friends and other people in my family to have children and I couldn't. The confusion, the unknown, you know, and like I said, a lot of the not fitting in. You know, there were years where that dreaded question of how many kids do you have, you know, or how old are your children, just tugged at my heart, you know.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I answered in not very polite ways, but you know, with some healing and some time, that changed and got better.
So that has been your experience existing in the world as a childless woman, or do you have more experiences as far as the stigma attached?
The stigma has gotten much better, you know, for me, because I don't take things as personally with some healing. But I think it's always just trying to know where you fit in society and community that is so parent-based and so fixated, you know, on families and on children.
Mm-hmm. So how have you found ways to cope with childlessness?
It changes all the time, but one of my main ways is that I have 2 or 3 close friends who were with me through my journey. And one is also childless, but she's child-free. She did not feel like she wanted to have children. And I'm a part of their lives. I'm a part of the lives of family members who have kids. And love being part of my nieces and nephews' lives. But I think the coping for me has been a lot of having good support from family and friends. They don't always understand, but they do support.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so since you were not diagnosed until 42, looking back on your journey, were there any clues along the way now that you sit back and think about it?
Yes, I guess physically, but I wasn't educated. You know, I hadn't tried to get pregnant before, and so I just didn't know. And I think looking back, I wouldn't have relied on doctors so much. I would have done my own research.
And the reason I'm asking the question is to help educate someone else who's looking at this series, and you're giving them some clues that you had along the way that the doctors may have ignored, but we know our body.
Right. We know our body. We know, you know, women talk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talk about our cycles and all the down and dirty. And I think I would encourage women, younger women, to be their own advocates.
Absolutely.
You know, and doctors are great. They're educated. We go to them for, you know, for our medical care. But if we feel like we're not receiving the answers that we're looking for, to keep searching, keep looking.
So knowing what you know now, what piece of advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh, that's a good question, Joby. I think I would want that young woman just to know that it'll all be okay, and that she's a strong woman, and that life may not turn out the way we plan, but it is still a good life, and will still hold many blessings, but different blessings.
Absolutely. So with or without children, our life has meaning and purpose. So what brings you happiness?
Lots of things. One is, like I said, being involved in the lives of other people's children, you know, my nieces and nephews' children. And I have a good marriage. My husband and I are close, and we, you know, have fun together. My spirituality is important to me, and that brings me a lot of happiness. And I'm just a pretty simple person. I like gardening. I like being out in nature, going for walks, reading. And as a social worker, I like helping people.
So have you figured out your life's purpose?
That changes also for me. We recently were involved with our 97-year-old uncle as he died, and we were his caregivers. And so I felt like that was my life purpose at that time. And that was, it was difficult, it was blessed, it was sad, but I wouldn't have wanted any other choice. I also think that my life purpose has been that I have had more time to care for my parents and to spend time with my parents because I didn't have children. I also think that, you know, a lot of days, just like I'm doing now, my purpose is sharing my childless story. When I was going through my dark days, I didn't know any other women like me. I didn't know any other women who wanted children and couldn't have them. Often it was the opposite, you know, they had children when the time wasn't good for them, or, you know, things like that. And so I want to just share my story, and maybe it'll help somebody else along the way to feel not so alone.
Well, speaking of that, you have an organization called Your Child is Hard. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. And so because I'm, I guess, a few years healed and through my dark childless days, again, I wanted to just help other women. And so I'm, as a social worker, I'm a coach. I'm a coach, a childless coach for women who are having their own dark days, their own difficult times, dealing with the stigma, dealing with the shame, their own family members, relationships, things like that. And so my website is yourchildlessheart.com. And I just hope that my experiences and my support can help other people.
And I'm sure that it absolutely will. Thank you so much, Laurie, for sharing your story. Do you have any last words?
Thank you so much for having me. And I think sharing our stories is a very important part of the journey for all of us.
Absolutely. I'll see you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Joby.
Childless woman, you're beautiful. Child-free woman, you are enough. This journey might not be easy, but we're in this together so we can get through this together by owning our voice. Thank you for your time and attention today. Please like, subscribe, share, and download this episode. From Totem Global, I'm your host, Joby Tyson. See you next time on As Told by Childless Women. To support this series, please visit astoldbychildlesswomen.com.